Welcome to Catholic Feedback. I'm your host, Keith Nestor. On this podcast, we connect the eternal truths of the Catholic faith with everyday life. Send in your questions and comments to feedback@catholicfeedback.com. This podcast is brought to you by Down to Earth Ministry, a ministry of stewardship, a mission of faith, and by the generous support of our patrons. For more information, please visit downtoearthministry.org. That's down, the number 2, earthministry.org. Let's get to it. Welcome to Catholic Feedback. I'm your host, Keith Nestor, and I am super pumped today because today we are going to be talking with the other founding member of our new band that we're starting called the Converse. And some of you know what I'm talking about, some of you don't. But anyway, we're going to get into all that. We're going to get into lots of things today, but I'm very excited to bring to you a friend of mine that some of you will recognize his voice and go, I know that from somewhere. Well, now it's all going to become clear. Today I'm talking with my good buddy Matt Swaim from the Coming Home Network, Sonrise Morning Show. He's a man of many talents and wears many hats. And today he's coming to Catholic Feedback because we have a very important topic that we're going to address today. And it's all about what the Catholic Church needs to do to be more welcoming to converts. And I can think of no better guy to talk to you about this than Matt. So welcome, Matt Swaim.
Thank you so much, Keith. And I don't know how we're doing on that project, the side project, the Converts, our band, but I am still actively working on my band, Narthex, which is going to be like an 80s power metal style band. And all the lyrics are going to be taken from parish bulletins.
Sweet.
Narthex. Look for that one.
That's cool. You could do so many things like with the X, you know, and the cross could be a T.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. My brain is just fried right now thinking of that.
Singing about how to join the Knights of Columbus. Oh, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing.
I think it's important for us to have like multiple side projects when we're in bands, because then when like one person is, you know, out of ideas, you just go to the next guy and it's
switch bands.
Yeah.
Switch bands.
Yeah. So anyway, we got a lot of stuff to think about, you and me. So we're gonna take this on the road eventually, I'm sure. But I want to hear tell everybody a little bit about who you are and your background and how you came into the position that you're in right now.
Sure. Well, there are, as you know, because you've gotten asked this a million times at this point, even though you're still like a baby Catholic. You know, every time you retell your story of what led you to the church, you tell it slightly differently. For the purposes of this, I'll just say that I was raised briefly United Methodist. My family moved to Ohio from Kentucky, and we became Nazarenes for a while, got into that kind of holiness movement, and then went on to be Free Methodists in Kentucky later on. All along the way, very much a Christian, like a textbook, everything that was going on in the mainstream of evangelicalism, we were tapped into. I had a pastor at one point who, had some infidelities that kind of broke a church that we were in. And it really kind of caused me to say, am I trusting the leaders or am I trusting Christ? And why don't I explore this stuff for myself? And that started a very long search that took me all the way through Asbury College. And with the help of everything from G.K. Chesterton and Flannery O'Connor to Daniel Amos and the 77s and Tooth and Nail Records, I kept on forming this idea of what is Christianity supposed to be. And as you know, when you start digging and you just want it to be authentic and real and true, you got to get to what do the first Christians do? I mean, what are the original founding fathers of Christianity? What would they have to say about what's going on now? Of course, after a while, you start to realize that the only place to go that still has that spirit, that still has that vibe, that still has that teaching, that still has that sacramental understanding and that sacramental power and authority is the Catholic Church. So lots of places along the way, but yeah, one thing I will note about my journey, and you were different than me because you had a couple of really strong mentors in your world, is that all my mentors, as I was exploring this theological trajectory that would lead me into the Catholic Church, all of my mentors were dead people. Like they'd all been dead for like decades, sometimes centuries. So like the people who like I was looking to as my best friends on this journey were long dead. I didn't meet any real live Catholics until like the very end.
That's such an interesting story. I mean, you hear you hear people talk about that. I remember listening to like Steve Ray talk one time. He said that he had never even been to a Catholic church before he decided that he needed to become Catholic. That just seems so strange, doesn't it?
Yeah, but that was my experience. As a matter of fact, being Catholic was kind of like the last, like the mass was the last thing on my list, like to actually go up and actually attend a mass. I mean, I'd been in some buildings, but never when mass was going on. I mean, I even had like a rosary that I was praying before I started going to mass. I mean, that's how, kind of intimidated I was, based on what I'd read of what I was going to encounter there. I mean, I got a rosary also because it's kind of in like your Catholic starter kit. Like, you want to look like you belong, and when you pull up, it's got to be off your rear view or people are going to just like be able to tell like that here comes a Methodist,
we could talk about like what are the things that you need in your Catholic starter kit to fit in. You need a 15-passenger van. You need a rosary hanging from it. You need I don't know. What else do you need?
I don't know. You got to have the scapular sticking just like slightly
just
out
a little
of your
bit out.
shirt, not enough to like actually to where like anybody who doesn't know just thinks like maybe it's like a thread of your shirt that got stuck or something. But people who do know are like,
okay, he's a Catholic.
Nice scapular, buddy. So I don't know. You got to put these in your little online shop there, Keith.
Man, I know. I need to get on that. I've got some stuff in there, but maybe I don't know. We'll work on that. So how long ago was it for you that you came into the church?
I'm class of 05. So I came in church in spring of 2005 at the Easter Vigil, and as I like to tell people, I'm 41 now, but at that time I was 25. And everybody's like, oh, you guys, you John Paul II Catholics are all part of this like new springtime. I'm like, John Paul II died like 6 days after I got here, Wow. So like I had almost and kind of in my early years, people thought that I was like being cruel and like disrespectful to John Paul II. They're like, don't you just love him? Isn't he amazing? I'm like, well, I mean, I've read a couple things about him. I have like no experience of this guy. And for all the people around me, like that's the only pope they'd ever known, because I think he became pope like the year before I was born.
Wow.
So I was much more influenced by Ratzinger, actually.
Really?
And his thought.
I have a picture of Pope John Paul II from when I went to Rome when I was still totally a Protestant. And he's way up in the little, he come out and wave. We were there in the square.
Out of the Pope balcony?
Yeah, the Pope balcony. I'm like, all right, that's cool. So awesome. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your work that you're doing now, and then people will understand kind of why I wanted you to be here to talk about this issue.
Sure. Well, you mentioned the Sonrise Morning Show, which is on weekday mornings on EWTN. So anybody who's got Catholic radio, that's an EWTN affiliate. If you're up at 6 Eastern, you can catch that. But the main bulk of the work that I do, 9 to 5 work, is with the Coming Home Network, and that's started by Marcus Grodi back in 93, I believe it was. After he had come into the church, he was a former Presbyterian pastor. He knew a couple of other clergy members with Protestant backgrounds who had come into the Catholic faith, and we're like, okay, what am I doing here? Which end is up? There's all kinds of culture shock, and he wanted to create basically this network of people who could kind of get together, accompany one another, let the people who are coming in who feel like they're completely alien have a sense of belonging and a sense that they're not alone on the journey. And then once they get in, help them kind of sort of learn the ropes a little bit, get their sacramental sea legs, as it were. And, part of the reason for it is because the church has like programs to welcome people into the church, and they have things like mystagogy, which are sort of like prescribed by the church. But it really helps when you meet someone who speaks your language and can help translate things for you. And so social safety net that we kind of provide for people on the journey, a way to kind of, I guess you could say, get over the culture shock of being Catholic, and really just help you to kind of get a feel for what it means to really be part of this church that you're interested in. So awesome. Yeah, it's a fun and awesome work. I mean, there's a lot of heartbreak involved with a lot of people who are going through some incredibly difficult stuff as part of that journey. But man, it's amazing. It's a blast.
Well, the way that you and I met was because of the Coming Home Network, when I was invited to be on the journey home with Marcus Grodi, and
I invited you.
You're the guy. Like, so for those of you that don't know, like Marcus Grodi, you don't meet Marcus until you're like walking in the door, ready
Nor
to
does
film
he
your
meet you,
episode.
by the way.
What's that?
we keep him in the dark on purpose.
Yeah. So like when you sit down with him to talk to him about your story, he doesn't know it, which I think is really cool. And that's on purpose so that he can react in real time to what's going on.
Yeah, because he's got to sit in for the audience, because the audience, I mean, if he like is pretending to be like, oh, Keith, that's amazing, it's not as fun. If you say something and it's like a jaw dropper, that makes it more fun, right? We can all experience it together. So.
Well, it was a great experience for me to be on there. And of course, that's where I got to know you. And I feel like for me, and this is, we'll talk more about the Coming Home Network soon, but they were very helpful to me when I was going through my journey. So the Coming Home Network isn't just about like, once you become Catholic, then you call them and say, okay, now what do I do? I started talking to people from the Coming Home Network, more than a year before I actually came into the church. And it was a very, very helpful resource to me, the people there. So,
well, you say a year before you enter the church, we have people who we've been working with for, there are people on the books who, we've been talking to for almost a decade, who are still like trying to piece it all together and trying to figure out, if this is really what God's calling them to, or if they're like talking to themselves or something,
I believe it. So on Catholic Feedback, one of the things that we do often is I take emails from listeners and viewers, and then I connect those eternal truths to their everyday life. So that's the purpose of the podcast. And one of the questions or situations that often comes my way that to me is pretty heartbreaking to me is from people who have the desire to become Catholic. They're like there. They're not anti-Catholic. They've gone through a lot of that. They're ready to go. They finally make that decision that they want to join the church, which is a long decision oftentimes. And they get there, and then they reach out to their local parish or something like that, and they get very little, if any, response, or I will just go with a less than enthusiastic response. And they'll contact me and they'll be like, Keith, what do I do? Like, I thought it would be different than this. So when that happens to me, it really, it drives me crazy, because I honestly feel like the sweet spot of my ministry, the thing that I feel like I'm on this earth to do, is to help people that have made that decision make the transition, kind of like you. But that's where like the book comes in that I wrote called The Convert's Guide to Roman
Your
Catholicism.
ultimate crash course to like figuring out this stuff.
Yeah, your first year in the church. What's it going to look like? I'm not going to be able to solve all of the issues with that, but what's the first year look like? And one of the most important pieces of your first year, as I talk about in the book, is finding your local church, finding that, because you have to have those relationships and those connections to help you. And I had a great local church that from the very beginning was there for me, but so many people don't. So I wanted to talk about that today with you because of the work that you do. I think two things are going to happen here. I think number one, you're going to help people understand what we as Catholics can do to help new converts be more welcoming. And we're also going to give those of you that are in that situation a really awesome, concrete next step. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of dig into why do we struggle with this as Catholics?
I think there are a number of reasons. One of them is a historical reason. So, there's some of these towns that have, one church in a neighborhood, but there used to be 3 churches in the neighborhood. There used to be the one where the Irish people all went, and the Polish people all went, and the German people all went. And then, people moved around and the suburbs got created and all this. And now all the Irish and German and Poles are all going to the same church. And nobody even knows until you ask them who's Polish and who's German, who's Irish. So that kind of ghettoized sort of like pocket mindset of Catholicism is still kind of with us. The sense that, well, of course you're going to be Catholic because your uncle was Catholic and your grandma was Catholic and your, nieces and nephews are Catholic, because this is the way that Catholics traditionally have, increased their numbers is by having babies, right? I mean, that's kind of how the Catholic Church has grown over the years. Whereas, from being a youth minister, the way you increase a youth group is by telling everybody to bring a friend next week, and the next week bring another friend, and have that friend bring another friend, and so on and so forth. And so there's always new people, and there's always kind of this, I don't want to say pressure, but this incentive to make sure that at every single time you meet, you're saying, oh yeah, who's new here today? What's your name? Yeah. The Catholic Church, not wired like that. Also, our worship is structured so much differently than anything that almost any Protestant has ever been involved in, where there's a pastor, and his job all week is to prepare to figure out what can I say that will connect personally with that guy who's on the back pew, who's walking into church for the first time and needs to hear what God's got for him. That's not how the Catholic Church is set up. It's set up as we are the guardians of the deposit of the faith that people were martyred for, that the apostles trusted to successors who trusted them to others, and we have a duty to Eucharistic worship. So here on the altar, whether you're paying attention or not, this is the reality that we're preserving and maintaining. And it's a paradigm shift, but it also means that we kind of have to understand the difference between those if we want to understand how to help people. So a Protestant coming in needs to understand that they're going to be into a fundamentally different world, because you may be used to going and doing Yelp reviews for churches until you go find one that's got it's tailor made to your exact needs and preferences and situation. But on the Catholic side, we need to understand that, maybe we know what's going on, but maybe there are people around us who are freaked out, and so freaked out that they didn't even know how to ask or who to ask about things. I mean, I remember when I would go visit the first couple times I went to Mass, I would sort of do a little mini church tour and look at the Stations of the Cross in the minutes after Mass, just hoping that somebody would say, "Hey, are you new here?" And it would never happen.
Wow.
And what a depressing thing when you're used to. I mean, in the Sunday school classes I grew up in, if you missed Sunday school 2 weeks in a row, I mean, I worked at a family Christian store. In the back, we had this whole church supply sections, and one of the things we sold was bulk postcards so that you could send them to people who missed Sunday school 2 weeks in a row. Missed you at Sunday school postcards. That's how on it I was used to my church being. And the Catholic Church just does not. They don't keep tabs that way.
Yeah.
It's just a different way of thinking about church. But it's also, the Catholic Church is a lot more communal than individual as well. So in a sense that they're not really as much zeroed in on what's happening to an individual. This even comes to the way that the church counts how many people are in it. If you were to talk about how big your youth group was, what kind of number would you put on it?
I just talk about who came every week.
Yeah. How many?
Weekly attendance. I'd say, we got, 250 kids a week.
250 kids.
Yeah.
If I were to ask you how many people are in your parish, how many would you say?
Well, it'd be more 2,000 families.
Families.
It's
right.
Yeah.
Isn't
they
that
measure
the weirdest
differently.
thing? Oh my gosh, the first time I heard people saying families, how many families are at their parish, I'm like, yeah, but how many people are in each family? We need a hard number here.
Yeah.
There's sort of this presumption on the part of the Catholic parish, the general Catholic parish, that everybody's there who's there as part of a family. And for a convert, that's not the case. For a convert, very often, nobody else in their family is on board. Maybe their spouse. So that's just a kind of a fundamental different way of looking at things.
So I mean, and we could dig way deep into that stuff, because I think that there are a lot of reasons behind why we struggle with this. Let's just identify so people understand that their experience isn't just their experience. What are some problems the church has when it comes to being welcoming to converts? I mean, I think about, your experience of kind of being the guy who walks around looking for some kind of, someone to just reach out to you and respond to you and say, "Hey, are you new?" Right? I remember kind of feeling that way when I first started going to Mass. I would walk in. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know the liturgy. I didn't know anything. And I remember feeling like, well, someone will help me. Someone will help me. And and I'm not trying to complain, but nobody ever came up to me and said, "Hey, are you new here? Do you need help?" So I think one of the problems that we have, first of all, let's just back even farther up than that. God bless our parish priests and our office workers, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard from people. I sent an email or I made a phone call and I got no response.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
So that's a problem. Let's start with
all
that
day,
one.
every day.
That's a problem.
All day, every day. And there can be a number of reasons for that. I talked to one of our members who said that she didn't discover until, later after she entered the church that the priest was, older and was suffering with memory issues. There could be there could be 100 reasons this breaks down, but it is a problem. And it's a really common one, like a shockingly common one. For whatever reason, we can pass blame however we want to pass blame later. It usually goes case by case, but it is a thing.
And I know that not every church is the same. And I know that because some people will be like, my priest isn't like that. Or maybe there's a priest watching going, I'm not like that. And granted, and I understand this is a problem, not just in Catholicism, but I'm telling you, and you're agreeing with me as a guy who works with a lot of converts, that this is a broken record. I reach out, I got no response, or it took forever, or it was a one-word response, or whatever. And of course, I like to think about everything from my own perspective, from how I was when I was a pastor. And I can tell you, if somebody ever called our church and said, I'm thinking about joining your church, or they came and said, I'm thinking about
Heck yeah, brother,
it was
let's
everybody
pray.
Drop everything right now and run to this person, buy them lunch.
99 are going to rejoice because the one sheep is coming home.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And I think sometimes new converts expect that same level of treatment, or at least some kind of response from the Catholic Church. And when you don't get it, you think, well, what's the deal here? So I'd say, okay, so lack of response would be, we'll just categorize that as the number one problem. And then maybe another problem could be something like, and you kind of alluded to this, and boy, I feel like we're just beating everybody up, but sort of
that's not the purpose of this. I hope that people realize that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is, how do we solve this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's just say this. Number two would be like a lack of hospitality. Okay.
That's huge.
And that doesn't mean that when you walk in, people are mean to you. But it could mean that when you walk in, you don't know what to do. And I think when you don't know what to do and you're new, oftentimes I think people who are Catholic, especially because like you said, it's your family identity. You grew up in the church. You can't relate to someone who doesn't know what to do because you've just never experienced that. But when you're the new person and you don't know which door to go in or where to sit or what to grab or what's going to happen, it's a very unnerving situation.
That door thing is a real issue, by the way, because in a Catholic church, that door that you open may spit you out on the side towards the front of the building. And if you don't know what you're doing, you'll be like, okay, never mind. I'm out of here, right? Because here you are in front of everybody and you don't even know what's going on.
Yeah. And I remember we used to have like consultants come to our church, and we used to go to conferences and stuff on how to be more hospitable, how to be more welcoming. And we had, and it seems kind of ridiculous now, but I think that there's something that can be said about it. But we had a strategy that was, we want every person that comes to our church to be greeted 7 times before they leave. So, that could be once in the parking lot, once at the front door, once at the hallway where you go left or right, So we had
once during the sign of peace even, yeah.
You had people stationed so that if you walked into our church, because the church I came from was a maze. It was an old church, kind of like a lot of Catholic churches. And we knew that we had to have the right signage everywhere, but we also, more importantly, had to have friendly, smiling, helpful people whose job it was.
Name tags? Were they wearing name tags?
They were wearing lanyards that said, basically it was like, they had a like greeter or something like that, or hospitality team. So they were, and their purpose that day at that worship service was to be the hospitality crew. They weren't just going to church and doing their thing, focused on their thing. Like they'd already went to a service, and that was their job. And, and again, I know that some of these things, and I've seen some of these things at some Catholic churches, but my point is a lack of hospitality. And I don't think that most people in Catholic churches are trying not to be hospitable. They just don't think that.
No. It's just not something that's top of mind. And, this is something that I hope people who are interested in the church and have had this experience also understand, is that there are things about the way the Catholic Church and a parish community is set up that are factors in this that are not meant to be hostile at all, but you just don't understand them yet. Like, so for instance, if you're at a church like mine that has a Saturday Mass, 2 Sunday morning Masses, and a Sunday evening Mass, and you're an usher and you see people coming in and you always usher the 8:30 Mass, and you see faces you haven't seen maybe before or maybe in a long time, your first instinct isn't, oh, this person must be new to the parish. Your first instinct is something more like, oh, maybe they usually go to the 5:30 on Saturday.
Yeah.
So bear in mind, cut the parish a little bit of slack in that area, because it's hard for them to even tell. It's not like you got the contemporary service and the traditional service, and that's your church. The Catholic Church is kind of set up. The Mass schedule is a lot more it's got a lot more people coming in and out,
100%.
even if it's a small parish.
And I think that's important. And what I want to also communicate to people is, we're not here trying to say that people have ill will. We're just saying that because the Catholic Church is the way it is, and we're not saying it should change. But what we are saying is there are different challenges that we have to step up to the plate to because of the way that the Catholic Church is. Like with what you said, that maybe we have to just be aware that if a new person coming in who doesn't understand these differences, they could wind up feeling completely intimidated or, God forbid, unwelcomed, because another practical thing, you walk into the sanctuary in a Protestant church, people are typically talking, they're shaking hands, they're greeting each other, there's music playing. It's kind of like, it's almost like sort of like a warm up for the worship service is you talk to people. You walk into a Catholic church and you don't do that. Yeah. So I remember feeling like when I went in there, I was like, oh, what is going on here? Is there a funeral or something? Or what's the deal here?
In some ways, that's really cool, isn't it?
Like, it's extremely cool.
When you experience that for the first time and all you've ever experienced is the glad handing and the coffee cup, cheersing and everybody kind of like talking about their week in a Protestant environment, and then you go in a Catholic church and you're like, something is different and real and more serious here. And it's amazing to me also, by the way, we got to preserve that. We got to preserve that because it's amazing to me how many people come to us and they talk about what opened their hearts, and it's not some evangelism program. It's not some whatever. It's they were in New York City and they decided, yeah, while I'm here, I might as well look into St. Patrick's. That's a big tourist spot. And they go into St. Patrick's and something happens to them. Something happens to them. So we got to preserve that.
I agree 100%. I think that's so important because, what I would never suggest is that the Catholic Church needs to change itself and water down what it is. That's not at all what I'm advocating for. What I think that you and I are talking about, what I think we need to recognize is how do we communicate who and what we are in a more effective way to people who are ready to join and are wanting to be part of this family.
Yeah, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Did you, when you had your little 7 touch point, strategy in there, did you have, because I remember when I went to a couple of different churches visiting around and just poking my head and I'm like, I wish I could just find the customer service desk.
Yep.
Did you have like a customer service desk in your church
Yeah.
to where like, new here, here's like some info about who we are and what we do?
Absolutely. We did. We called it a welcome center, and it was literally a big desk type thing. And there was always someone, maybe 2 people stationed behind it. And it was at a place where you could walk right in and see it. And when you walked in, that was always a place to direct someone. Hey, if you're new here and you want to find out, go back here, pick this up. And there was a person there to greet you and say hello to you. So yeah, we definitely had that.
Yeah, that's such a crucial thing. And it seems so simple. I mean, I remember I've talked to a couple of parish, workers who are asking about like, how can we get more people? And I'm like, one of the questions I ask is, if a new person came into your church interested in becoming Catholic, how hard would they have to dig to find the information that they would need to figure out how to become Catholic or who to even talk to about it? Would it be like the 4th page in the bottom corner in 9-point font in your bulletin? Is there like any signage anywhere that says interested in becoming Catholic? Email Stella, or like, is there anything anywhere? Does a pastor ever from the pulpit, I'm using Protestant terms now. Does your priest ever during the announcements say, want to welcome anybody who might be new here. If you'd like to learn more about who we are at St. Ignatius, then please do visit our welcome desk. We'd love to get to know you.
I think that's great. Okay, so
that's 8 seconds of your time. 8 seconds of your time during announcements.
You're hitting on something I want to cover in just a second. I want to back up just a little bit. So I think we've done a good job, and I'm sure there are plenty more of identifying, some of the things that are inherent to Catholicism that make it difficult for new people to come in, which again, we're not saying we change any of these things. We're just saying we have to work around these challenges. Number 2, we talked about what are some of the problems that we have. So we've identified some problems: lack of response, lack of hospitality, lack of of a clear path sometimes for a new person to be on-ramped into the church. So now let's talk a little bit about some solutions. And I want to break this down into two categories, Matt. I want to talk about things that, first of all, everyday Catholics can do. So things that aren't necessarily you need a church program for, but things that the average run-of-the-mill Catholic who's not working for the church or in operating in any official capacity, what can that person do? And then I want to talk about, we kind of touched on it a little bit, what are some things that parishes as a whole need to do? So since we're already sort of talking about some of the parish things, let's stick with that for a minute. So you're saying maybe it's just as simple as the priest welcoming anyone who might be new and giving them the next step on where to go. So then that means you have to have a next step on where to go, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is have somebody who's designated to follow up. I mean, unless you're going to be getting 40 new people a week saying that they're interested in the church, one person can be the point person for that, and just say, hey, we get 2-3 new names this week. Steve, can you follow up, email or call? You can even have we even do this with the Coming Home Network. You sign up with us saying you're interested in the church, you get an automatic email right back that tells you exactly what the next steps are to plug in with us. And and it's got my email address, or it's got, Jim Anderson's email address, or it's got somebody else's email address. So if you reply to that, a real human being starts talking to you right after that. You can have something that's a form thing that gets sent out, but has your reply on it. That's a very easy step. One of the things that and a lot of parishes are resistant to this for a number of reasons. And of course, during COVID, you can't really do this.
Yeah.
But pew cards, every church I ever grew up in had pew cards. When the offertory comes around, there's a little card, and you can say, if you want to, if you're new, you can say on that pew card, I'm new. Here's my address. I would like to, and it has like a series of boxes you can check. I am in need of prayer. I'm interested in learning more about the Bible. I'm interested in becoming a Christian. You can do a Catholic version of that. Or can you pray for this request? That's one of the easiest ways we kept track of prayer requests in my Protestant churches growing up, is those pew cards.
We had the same thing. And I'll tell you what, they're very helpful, but there's a caveat. If someone does that, they have to get a response within like 48 hours.
You got to.
If this is going to be, so now we're talking to like the parish coordinators of community or whatever. If you're going, oh yeah, that's a great idea, we'll put those cards in there. Let me tell you something. Don't do it unless you have an intentional, foolproof way for that person to be followed up with. Because what can end up happening is you might think that because you had a prayer card, you did your job. But if that person turns that card in and then it sits on a secretary's desk or some part-time staff person's desk for 2 weeks, then it's even worse than if you didn't do it. So please, I think it's a great idea, but if you're involved in that kind of thing at your parish,
you got to have a team.
You got to have a team before you set this into place. The worst thing that can happen is, failed hospitality. That's worse than no hospitality. So if you're going to do this, be intentional with it and have your ducks in a row and have it all set up. But I love what you're saying, Matt, about having a person whose job it is to say, and I don't necessarily mean a paid job, but their responsibility.
And again, if you've got a welcome desk in the back and you got a pastor every Sunday saying, "Hey, we want to say welcome to everybody who's new here. We'd love to get to know you. Stop by the welcome desk." That can save you the pew card trouble.
Yeah.
Right. But again,
you can say, give that to this person.
But again, you've got also, having a person who's actually back there and paying attention to when somebody comes up, because, bear in mind, if you're a parish person and you're sitting there, talking to your, golf buddy from the week, and if somebody else comes up who you don't recognize and is like quietly looking through the materials on the desk, you better say, "Hang on, Bob, I'll talk to you next week. I got somebody I want to talk to here."
Yeah.
Because bear in mind that the people who are coming into your church, if they are interested in the church, they also feel like an alien from another planet.
Yep.
And they want you to talk to them first.
Yeah,
right?
It's a rare person who walks in and goes, "Hi, I'm new here. Where do I sign up?"
I'm new here. How do I join this weird organization where I have no idea what's going on? Right? No, there needs to be that kind of proactivity, that kind of listening sense to you if you're going to be running that welcome desk. You can't just be. And here's another thing that's so important on the parish level is when you get those calls to the office or when you get those emails in, your response back does not need to be, Oh, thank you for your interest. We have a series of classes. Do you have your baptismal certificate?
Oh man,
Your response back to them needs to be, that's so amazing that you want to be part of our parish family. What's open to your heart to all this?
I love it.
Like, that's what your response needs to be, because otherwise, what makes you different in that person's mind from the DMV, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not registering to put in your mail-in ballot for like, this is like the most true and good and beautiful thing that God has ever gifted the world with. Your first response to somebody who comes with interest in it needs to be, oh, I can't believe that you're excited about joining this thing that is the most important thing in my world.
I love that. So what you're getting at, and I think this is key to all of this, is whether you're a parish, whether you're a person, we'll talk about things individuals can do here in a minute, but it's a mindset thing. You've got to have this mindset that says, I am actively, intentionally looking for people who are wanting to be a part of this, and I'm going to reach out in the best way I can. But I love what you said about the whole, when someone's interested, don't point them to a program and just be like, oh, well, thank you for your interest. You know, we have a class that
You
meets
need
on
to watch
Wednesday
Bishop Barron's videos.
Yeah,
Right?
no.
No,
What people
you
are
do
looking
the work.
for,
You do the work.
exactly.
You build the relationship. Yeah.
People are looking for connection. They're not looking for, necessarily oh, I need to go to a class. I mean, maybe they will eventually, but there's so much I could say about this because I worked very, very hard at this in my former life,
Yeah.
and I feel like those are things that as Catholics we can come in. Now here's the mindset thing I think we have to address, because I guarantee you right now, Matt, there are some people watching this going, that's Protestant. We're not doing that. That's Protestant. Because let's face it, there's some grouchy Catholics out there.
Nothing that we have said that dilutes anything, about who we are as Catholics.
Exactly. But there are some Catholics out there, and I've ran into a few of them here and there, that they hate Protestantism so much that if anything smells Protestant to them, they reject it outright, even if it's something that could bring people into the Catholic faith. So, I mean, I've had people,
by the way, which is a very Protestant thing to do.
Well, it is, isn't it? But I mean, I've had people tell me on my YouTube channel, for example, you need to shut up because you're a former Protestant. We don't want to hear from you. I've literally had people say that to me, like, oh, this sounds too Protestant because I talk about Jesus. Go figure. And some people, when they have this mindset, like it's almost one of those things like, look, when I was your age, I walked to school uphill both ways in the bitter freezing cold to become a Catholic. So we're not making this easy on you. Like nobody welcomed me. Nobody did this for me. Nobody took care of me. You're just trying to, appeal to people. So it's got to be difficult. And so if that's you, I'm just talking to that guy or that girl right now. If that's you, just do you, but don't sign up to be a greeter. Don't sign up to work at the hospitality desk. And please, for the love of God, don't talk to anybody in mass that you don't know, okay?
And also, don't find somebody who's interested in the church and start sending them like anti-Pope Francis stuff.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Please don't
Right?
do that.
Listen,
Please don't do that.
I think we all have like questions that we've raised over the years about anybody who's in charge in any office in the church. But guess what? If somebody's coming in from the Protestant church, they've already like gone through some big steps to figure out whether or not apostolic succession is real. Don't spend your first few conversations with them trying to convince them that it's not.
And I'm sure you've been there. I've had that. I mean, I remember when I first became Catholic and I started my YouTube channel, I would get all these messages from people all the time. And it was all of this, anti-Pope Francis, anti-Bishop, like all these conspiracy theories, all this stuff like that, which, I get that there's a healthy place to have those conversations.
Oh,
no
there
doubt.
absolutely is.
But it's not.
They have to happen.
Yeah, but it's not to the guy who just became Catholic 10 minutes ago,
No.
Because it's.
Or the guy who's getting ready to join RCIA and you're like, well, here's what you need to know about the maybe false Pope that you're about to sign up. You are actively pushing people away from the Eucharist when you do that.
Maybe we should do another episode sometimes called, because I always think of these things like this, but like 10 things never to say to a new convert or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, there are many. But let's just say they can get into all the tribal battles later.
Yeah.
They can get into all the inside baseball. They can get into like your really interesting devotion to like a really obscure Marian apparition later. Right now, let's just focus on the main stuff and find out what they're hungry for in this moment.
I agree. That's important. So, okay. So there's 1,000 more things we could say that parishes need to do, but let's talk for a few more minutes because I think it'll be helpful for like, what can the average person do that isn't connected necessarily like in an official capacity to the parish, but just you're going to mass every Sunday. You're a practicing Catholic, and you want to have a heart for convert. You want to be helpful to people. What can you do? What are some things you can do?
Well, I mean, I think there are two different kinds of groups of people we're talking to. So one would be the people who there's someone in your life who you want to become Catholic and you want to reach out to them and bring them to the true faith. I think that's a different separate category. The other is kind of like having your ear to the ground and figuring out who's interested and how can I help them.
Yeah.
And that second group is really who we work with at the Coming Home Network. We're not out there trying to like put flyers on all the Baptist churches in our towns and be like, hey, Pastor so-and-so, you really are in the wrong spot. That's not what we do. We work with people who are already interested and we kind of help them along. And that's a very different kind of conversation. I don't want to dwell too much on the helping bring others into interest in the church. But one thing I do want to say is, because this question comes up all the time, is how do I get my son or daughter or coworker or whatever to come back to the sacraments? What book should I give them? That is a noble thought.
It might not be the best place to start, right?
But that's not the place you start.
Yeah.
The place you start is, what is my loved one hungry for? What is in their life what is the thing that they are searching for that I know that we have? Not what is because I think that there's this misperception that the only reason that people are not Catholic is because they don't have enough information. And that ain't it. Wow. Mere information is not going to solve the problem. So that's that group over there. For people who are interested, I mean, just your availability is a big part of it. And don't pounce on them and don't assume anything about them, because you don't know. You don't know if they're coming into the church because they suddenly had this epiphany that they don't know how to interpret the Bible for themselves, or you don't know if they're doing it because they had some personal tragedy and they just didn't know where to go, and that's why they're coming to the church. You don't know if they've read Steve Ray and Scott Hahn, or if they've only ever read the Reader's Digest, spirituality columns. You don't know any of that stuff. Just find out what they're actually interested in and what their actual experience is. Don't be like, okay, here's someone I'm ready to mold.
So then let's get super practical. And you can't do that unless you first talk to them.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe if you're an everyday Catholic and you're at mass and you see someone who looks new, could be new, like, is there anything against church teaching that says I can't go up to that person and say, hey, how you doing? Are you new here?
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing at all about that. And, I mentioned, and this is, maybe you just build it into your conversation. You're like, hey, I don't usually see you at this 8:30 mass. Do you go to another mass here? Or are you new? Where you disarm all the things out of the gates, right? Or, one of the other things too, and this is especially when it comes to families with little kids.
Yeah.
Is they are the ones who feel the most awkward and completely out of place if they're visiting the Catholic Church for the first time, because they're used to going to a place where they have a nursery and a kid drop off.
Yeah.
Right. And here they are in this place where they're supposed to be super quiet, and they got like one squirmy 4-year-old, and they're like, I would just rather die right now than experience 5 more seconds of this. Go up to those people and be like, hey, you have such a beautiful family. Doesn't have to be hard.
Sure.
Doesn't have to be hard. What are your kids' names? You don't have to do what they did at my churches. Where then at this point in the conversation, the old man would hand the little kid like a Werther's Original candy, right? That's what usually happened in that.
Werther's Original.
That's how you knew.
That's
in the 80s. That's how you knew if somebody was over the age of 60, is if they handed you a Werther's Original.
I like Werther's Original. Maybe I'm getting old.
They're good. How old are you?
I'm not going to say here.
You don't have to answer that.
No. I'm 46. I'm 46.
You're not Werther's old. You're not Werther's Original old. But you just keep your radar up. I mean,
yeah.
Here's what Catholics don't necessarily understand about people who are in that situation. To you, it's just a person who you think, they don't usually sit there. Maybe they're from one of the other masses. To the person in that pew, they're like, everybody in here can tell that I'm a Protestant.
Yeah.
Right?
So sometimes I know, like, okay, so let's say a person coming in, first of all, they feel very self-conscious that they don't know what they're doing.
Extremely.
if I remember when I first started going to Mass, and especially when I first started going to Latin Mass, I felt like I am offending every single person around me because I don't know when to kneel, stand, sit, and I don't know the responses. So therefore, everyone hates me. And that's a little dramatic, but that's sort of the place you're coming from. And I remember just a couple times, there might be a person who would kind of look over and smile or, give a little encouragement or whatever. That stuff goes a long way. So I would say this, if everyday people, if you look around or you become aware somehow that someone around you doesn't know what they're doing, whatever you do, don't shoot them the death glare like, you didn't kneel at the right exact time. What is your problem?
And Catholics don't even realize how much they do this.
Yeah.
They really don't. Especially if like you're one of those people who, like me, once Mass is over, I'm not jetting for the door the second that the first note plays on the closing hymn. I'm one who waits for the closing hymn to finish. Then I kneel and my son and I say the St. Michael prayer. And there can be a tendency among the people who kneel it out there at the end to kind of like look askance at the people who are all leaving and be like, well, we guess they're not quite as prayerful and devoted as I am.
Where are you going?
Yeah. maybe there's somebody who hasn't been to Mass in 25 years and decided to like check it out. Maybe they're somebody who is from another Christian background or no faith background at all and is just checking it out. And they're like, well, I guess this is the part where we all get up and leave. You just don't know. You don't know.
So be welcoming to people, have the mindset, be just looking, get out of your own head for 5 seconds and look around and just go, okay, is there somebody here?
Journey Home episode. So Dr. Alicia Thompson, you need to go watch her episode. It's incredible. But she talks about how she was an agnostic visiting this like Baptist church and she was trying to piece it all together. And one Sunday, like she just heard the thing that just struck her. Right. And the pastor's like inviting people up to the altar call. And she didn't go because she was just frozen. Wow. And some lady saw her and read her body language and walked over and said, hi, I noticed you sitting by yourself. I'm so-and-so. I just want to let you know if you need me to pray for you, I'm here. And the floodgates opened, right? That one woman just having like the antenna up just to notice that here's a person who was just sitting there and did not look like she knew what was going on or what to do with herself. And sometimes that's really subtle. And don't assume anything when you go up and introduce yourself to somebody either. Just keep it light. Just say, hey, I don't know if I've seen you before. I'm so-and-so. Do you go to one of these other Masses or are you new here?
Yeah.
And if they say, I go to one of these other Masses, you big dummy, I've been going here for 30 years. You'd be like, oh, well, I guess that's my fault for being a creature of habit over here at this 8:30 and not being in my own world. So it's nice to finally meet you.
Yeah, no big deal. That's so great. I love that thought of just, one act that you can do to help someone might just be that thing that God was waiting for. Another thing that I think about is if you've seen someone regularly that you don't really know, maybe just strike up a conversation with them and invite them to go to coffee or invite them to do something. I was interviewing a young woman who was brand new to the faith for a project I'm working on. And she was going to Mass all by herself at our church, daily Mass. And she mentioned to me that another young woman whom I know came up to her outside in the parking lot and just said, hey, I don't know you. Would you like to go to coffee with me? And these two young women went to coffee and it was this incredible thing. And I was so proud of that girl who took that step and said, hey, I see you here by yourself every day. Who are you? I'd like to get to know you. Like sometimes it's that mindset that can just be so huge because this particular person is brand new to Catholicism and doesn't have like a big group of people that she's tight with.
Well, you brought up such an important point for a number of reasons. And I want to say it right here and right now. Do not sleep on daily Mass because daily Mass, especially for the Protestant pastors we work with, they got jobs on Sunday morning.
Yep.
Daily Mass that's their inroad.
It was for me.
That's how they test the waters because they figure smaller group, less likely to make a fool of myself. I can sit in the back. Nobody will notice. I can sort of like zero in on one or two people who are doing things and kind of learn the ropes of this, as opposed to being in like this mob where like I'm surrounded and like I'm claustrophobic and don't know what I'm doing. Daily mass was an absolute huge thing for me. So, and those daily masses, it's because of the smaller crowds, it's also a lot easier to sort of pick out who might be new, who might be just kind of feeling this out. And they're not like shoving you out of the building the way that they might be on a Sunday to get ready for the next mass. So don't sleep on those daily masses as opportunities to notice somebody who's looking.
Great point. That is a fantastic point, because that's right on. People pop in on their lunch break, sometimes, or before work. And, the point that you made earlier, Matt, about when you said, what are people looking for? And the kind of person that walks into a daily mass by themselves during the work week, they're looking for something. And we have to be able to connect that. So I think from the standpoint, we talked a little bit about the parish stuff that they could do, but here's one more thing, and then I want to ask a different question. Those parish things, and I hate to use the word programs, but like the hospitality program or whatever that we want to see happen in parishes, those things don't happen without volunteers. So if you're a person who's like the everyday Catholic, volunteer for that stuff. Make it known to your priest that, hey, I want to help with this. Because here's the thing that I don't want to see happen. I don't want to see a bunch of people watch this episode and then tell their priest, you need to watch that episode and do something about it. What I want to see are people who say, hey, this is a problem. Let's fix this, and I'll be in charge of that. What do you think,
Yeah,
Father?
absolutely.
I'll be in charge of that. And then I think your priest is going to be like, great, because I've never met a Catholic priest who hasn't had a passion for this and who would say no to anyone who came to them and said, I want to help make our parish a more welcoming environment. I mean, I defy you to find a parish priest who would shut the door on that, because that's their heart. That's why they do what they do. But they're so overwhelmed with so many other things. So the everyday Catholic needs to say, I'm going to be an intentional part of this solution in this process. So maybe one of the things that you can do is help get something like this started in your parish.
And start small for a couple of reasons, because the one thing that will make your parish priest recoil is, hey, Father, I want to meet with you like 3 or 4 times to try and develop this idea. That'll actually turn him off, right?
Yeah, he'll be like, I don't have time for that.
Or don't hand him a packet and say, here's my 12-step plan of what I think that I can do and implement in the parish, because then he'll be like, oh no, this is going to the bottom of my pile. Just say, Father, would it be okay if I stood back at the back and just answered questions for anybody who might come and be interested in the church? Like if we set up like a little like welcome table with a sign.
Yeah. And you be willing to make that commitment, and then say to him, look, I'm going to commit to doing this. And when he sees that you're serious, then he'll be like, okay, I'm on board with this. And that could be awesome.
Don't create work for your priest, even by making him oversee another project.
Amen.
Make it as hands off for him as possible. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to switch gears a little bit here, because I want to get to this important issue of with the work that you're doing, Matt. Like, what would you say, or what do you say to people who are in that situation where they're wanting to find out more information about converting or whatever, and they've reached out and the door just hasn't been welcoming to them? What should they do?
Well, first of all, they should come over to the Coming Home Network and sign up for our online community, where we have like 2,000 members who are in active conversations about this stuff, sort of like crowdsourcing ideas and thoughts on all this. And that's the network part of the Coming Home Network is kind of the most fruitful part of it, just because you get enough people from enough different parts of the country, and actually the world at this point, who are sharing those experiences and saying, especially converts, who are looking at people who are in that sort of holding pattern now and saying, hey, it's better on the other side. Right. To be able to make that sort of connection with people who have, shared trauma, right? Like, broke your leg, I broke my leg too. Let's be buds. It's the same kind of thing. So that's an important thing. But the other thing I would say is, remember what it is that's drawing you to the church. Chances are you're not drawn to the church because you're like, you know what? I think Francis he's a pretty competent pope. I could serve under his leadership, right? What is it that drew you to the church? Most likely it was truth. It was the sacraments. It was some eternal thing about the church, not some temporal thing like you liked the music or like you had a friendly coworker who was Catholic. Something eternal is drawing you to the church. And so latch onto that and keep it going. That's people keep on asking me questions, and I've done a number of interviews where I've interviewed people or they've interviewed me about like why be Catholic during this world where political divides seem to be entering the church and scandals seem to pop up every news cycle. It's something new. And I'm like, I didn't join the church for any of that stuff. I didn't join the church because I thought it had the most interesting political makeup, or that I thought that it had the world's greatest, preachers and bishops and popes and stuff. I joined it because like this is the eternal thing that the apostles entrusted to people who entrusted it to others, and this is the thing the Holy Spirit promised to sustain and maintain. And I don't want to say it doesn't matter that those other things are happening, that I experience unfriendliness or that whatever, that I, am part of an imperfect community with imperfect leaders and everything. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not the most important thing. The most important stuff is the eternal stuff.
That's good advice.
Stay on that. Stay on the eternal stuff.
Yeah, I think again, we talk about mindsets. You got to have that mindset that when you become Catholic, and again, this is another big difference between Protestantism and Catholicism. When you join a church in the Protestant world, you're joining that particular local parish, and that's really kind of your be all end all. Even within denominations, most people aren't like, oh, well, I really want to become, Episcopal, so I'm going to go find the Episcopal church. That's really not what happens in Protestantism. You go find that particular local church that has the pastor you like, the programs you like, the worship you like, and the people you like, and you say, these are my people, this is my crew. Whereas in Catholicism, the local parish is really secondary to what the church is, right? It's important, but you don't say, yeah, I'm a convert to Immaculate Conception. You say, local church. That's my local church. I don't say I'm a convert to Immaculate Conception Church. I say I'm a convert to Catholicism, and that's my parish. So
yeah.
Try. And I guess, and maybe it sounds bad, but I don't know. But I would just tell people this too: if you are contacting a parish and they're unresponsive, then try another one.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that strategy, and I actually employed that strategy because Keith, to give you an idea of the stuff that I ran up against, I went to one pastor and he's like, that's great, but we've already gotten a few months into our RCIA program. Why don't you contact us in September?
Oh my goodness.
When we start another round of that. Or another one who's like, when I was non-vehicular at a certain point in my life, and there was a parish walking distance to me, and I contacted the priest, and he didn't get back to me, so I flagged him down after Mass one day, and he's like, well, we don't have a DRE at the moment. What you can do is you can drive down to this other church about 8 miles down the road, do RCIA with them, and then you can get confirmed down here at the Easter Vigil. I'm like, did you not hear a word I was saying about how I don't have a car?
Yeah, so DRE is Director of Religious Education,
That's right. That's right.
Wow. I know, man.
Or in that case, it was don't respond ever. So but yeah, no, and that was a bad experience. But at that point, I had already bought in, right? I already knew that it wasn't about Pastor so-and-so, Father so-and-so, or it wasn't about like any of those things. So it wasn't a deterrent to me at that point. But, this kind of harkens back to something that, you probably hear all the time. I hear it all the time because we're sort of more public in our orientation. And that is that you converts are always the smartest, most informed Catholics, about who have like the best sense of like, more than all of us do. I'm like, that's because anybody who was slightly on the fence, you ran off. The only people that made it through were the ones who were hardcore and serious about it.
Wow. That's.
I know that's like probably a little bit harsh of an indictment, but it's very often the case. Like, I've sat in RCIA programs where I'm like seeing people who, I know I can see in their eyes they have questions that are burning in them, and they're just getting like either stuff read to them or stuff that's like way beneath their intelligence. They're getting like a second grade Sunday school class when they're wanting to know like, but what is the deal with purgatory? Like, is the Eucharist real? So yeah. But don't get discouraged by that. If you're watching Keith Nestor's podcast, chances are you're already kind of dialed in. So I would say to you, if you've watched this far into a Keith Nestor cast, then you know the stakes, and you know that it's not worth giving up the search just because somebody didn't return your call. Call somebody else.
Yeah.
Call us. Call us at the Coming Home Network, right?
And I think that's going to be, and to my listeners, I mean, this is, Matt and I have been talking about this, and just know this: if you contact me and you say to me, Keith, I'm having problems with my local parish, I'm in this particular city, what should I do, this and that, my answer to you is going to be this: contact the Coming Home Network, because the Coming Home Network exists for this purpose. Yeah. So obviously that's what we're gonna push people toward. But tell me a little bit more about what will happen if someone contacts the Coming Home Network. Like what? Because I think there's a little bit of misconception. Maybe this is like outside consulting that I'm going to do for you here. But there's a little bit of a misconception, I think, sometimes, especially for pastors, about the Coming Home Network, where people used to tell me when I was getting ready to quit my job, they'd say, "Oh, contact that Journey Home guy.
Well, they'll
He'll
pay
give
your
you
mortgage."
money." You know, they give money to people who come into the church, and I'm like, I don't think so.
Until we get like a $50 million like trust fund that we can dip into to do that, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
We're not going to be like, hey, we're giving out free scholarships to any pastor who converts.
Yeah. So and that's fine. That was never my expectation, obviously, because I knew that wasn't the case from whatever. But what will happen if someone reaches out to the Coming Home Network and says, "Hey, I'm on this journey. What do I need to do? I'm having a hard time with my local community.
Yeah,
I need some help."
Well, first of all, what you're going to find is a whole bunch of people who've been through what you've been through, and who know your language. And it's funny because sometimes people will sign up and they'll have like what you think is like a super obscure background. Like I came from a non-instrumental Church of Christ. And like 2 or 3 people will be like, "Oh, so did I. That's so crazy. I thought that was like the only person who didn't believe in pianos in church who decided to become Catholic," right? Or like, every now and then we'll get like a Wiccan, and somebody will be like, "Yeah, I'm coming here from like a Wiccan background." And like 4 or 5 people will be like, "Yeah, I was a Wiccan too," like because people who come from those different backgrounds have different sets of questions and first principles. If you listen to an apologetics discourse, even now, even me being Catholic for 15 years, I still refer to all people who aren't Catholic as Protestants if they're Christians, right? But the Coming Home Network is so great and unique in the sense that we understand that there's like no such thing as a Protestant, right? There's like 30,000 varieties, and that's a low estimate, because just having that ability to talk to other people who've been through what you've been through is so huge, because a lot of people don't have that opportunity even in their local parish. And then there's other things too. I mean, we have some like vocational support in terms of like helping, get you some resources to help understand, well, what can you do if like you were an active ministry and that was your job? Like, what are some of the ways your gifts can be used? We post jobs, opportunities as they come to us and that sort of thing too. But a lot of it is just showing people the ropes.
Yeah.
Like if you walk into the Catholic Church, it's like, did you ever see Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where like Marcus Brody, the librarian, right? The old librarian who's friends with Sean Connery, right? He gets dropped off in like the middle of Tunisia in a market, and he's walking through. He's like, "Excuse me, does anybody speak English? Anybody?" That's what you feel like when you're in the Catholic Church, like total culture shock. And just like helping you with the dumb, weird questions, or helping you like learn how to pray as a Catholic, or helping you like, I'll never forget this one girl who, and I'm not going to say her name because she may be watching this. I don't want to embarrass her, but she asked a question a couple of years ago in the community. Like, I keep hearing people talk about how amazing Eucharistic adoration is in a holy hour. Like, and I want to go, but I don't know what to do. How long do I have to go for it to count? Is it disrespectful to read in there? Is it, disrespectful to like talk to anybody? Am I allowed to bring my Bible? And, people don't realize what the learning curve is like. And just,
it's true.
People to be answering and be like, "Oh, no, I totally remember, you don't have to worry about this. You don't have to worry about that." My one piece of advice to her, by the way, was don't show up like 5 minutes before the end of the hour or 5 minutes into an hour, because the person in there might think that you're their relief and they might take off and you're like by yourself in there. That's my piece of advice. They won't tell you that in RCIA, but we will tell you that. But yeah, again, that solidarity. And that's solid. That's what we've been talking about this whole episode, is just being in kind of community with people is so crucial for this, because, people can Google the answers. They can go back and watch, 100 of your podcasts about why Catholics believe this and Protestants believe that, and what the difference is, and what's right and what's true, and all that. That stuff is Googleable. What's not Googleable is friends, right?
Amen.
You can't Google who will be my friend, right? And so that's really what we provide.
Well, I think it's fantastic. And here's the other part about, because you have a network, you could possibly know a priest in a particular region or a diocese or an area. So if someone's
we do make that reference.
Yeah, because like one person I talked to recently wanted to get baptized. And I mean, that's kind of important, right? And they couldn't find someone who would help them with baptism. And actually, I remember I talked to a person recently who said, I have someone who wants to get baptized, but the church isn't responding. Should we just take him to a Protestant pastor to get him baptized? Whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, we got to find someone on the ground in this city to help that. And of course, I don't know anybody in all these cities. So I'll post something on Facebook. Does anybody know somebody in this town? And then invariable, I'll get messages from people that don't, but want to tell me that I should read this book or watch this video.
Right.
No, I really need to know, like, who's a guy in this town. And you guys have that. So
we do. We do. We don't have every single town in every single state in the United States of America.
Right.
But what's funny is that you can even use the little members near me function, for the people who've decided that they want to put in what town that they're from, You can be like, hey, who's in DC in my case, oh, wow, there's 30 people in a 10-mile radius of me, so. Which
can be so important. I mean, it's so crucial for new converts to have people around them they can walk through this with. And
it's the missing piece. It's the missing piece. You can Google everything else.
Amen. So here's the thing. Maybe you out there that are watching this or listening to this, you've been praying like, Lord, use me in some way. Maybe you're that missing piece. Maybe you are the answer to somebody else's prayer. And if you would allow the Holy Spirit to guide you and use you to be even that person who just comes alongside someone and says, hey, I go to this mass, but I don't recall seeing you. Is this normally where you attend? Are you new? Open that door. That could be the answer to some grandma who's been praying the rosary for 70 years for her granddaughter. You could be the answer to that prayer if you would be willing to let the Holy Spirit lead you to that person and get out of your own head for a minute and step outside of yourself and reach out to that person.
Never underestimate the power of those little things. So
Amen.
I don't know if you've ever talked to Zubair Simonson, former Muslim who has been on the journey home, and he was at one point going to Tim Keller's church in New York City. And after he became a Christian, and then he was trying to figure out, all these denominations, everything's different. I don't know which one's which. And he decided to go into a prominent Catholic church in New York City and just pray, because he's just trying to try a little bit of everything. And he was being moved in some ways towards the Catholic Church. And when he was in there, some homeless lady came into the back of the church and started sort of wailing loudly and crying. And he's like, this is, I don't know, somebody's going to do something about this. I don't know what's going to happen back there with this lady that's crying. And the security guard walks over and he's like, oh, well, he's going to throw her out. And he walks over and hugs her. And he's like, that's the moment where he was like, oh, I think I'm going to become a Catholic.
Wow.
That was, I bet you that security guard has no idea that happened in that church that day.
Well,
no idea.
There's a guy in Chicago named Craig. This is going to sound really weird that I remember this, but my friend Austin from Gospel Simplicity made that video where he's a Protestant and he goes to St. John Cantius in Chicago.
Oh yeah, it's a great video. Austin, if you're watching, love that video, man.
He's watching. And Austin talks about how, as he was kind of doing the Matt Swaim thing where he's looking around, this guy came up to him named Craig and says, he says, hey, I think you're the guy from the video I saw. Would you like a tour? And took him around the church and spent all this time with him. And I thought to myself, whoever that guy Craig is, he needs to go on the road with to be a church consultant, a parish consultant, to help people.
Spot the noobs.
Yeah. So that's so incredible. Yeah, well, listen.
And there are 100 other stories like that of where a tiny, tiny, tiny little thing. I mean, not like a mega epic thing, like as Mother Teresa says, you can save somebody's soul with a smile.
Amen.
I've seen it happen.
It can happen. Well, listen, I am going to link to the Coming Home Network down in the description. So if you guys are new and if you're interested in this, or here's another angle. If you're someone who's like believes in that work and is like, man, I wish I could be more like that. Hey, the Coming Home Network needs your support. So donate to them. Go on there. And because I remember when I went on the journey home, I was expecting, because I've watched that program, so I kind of like romanticized that in my mind. I expected I was going to walk in to this state-of-the-art, huge, incredibly luxurious facility with all this stuff, and like get buzzed into the front door and have all these people there waiting with like flowers and candy and like, oh, welcome. Here's the way, And when we pulled up, I'm like, this is the most unassuming. It's like in a little tiny, not even a strip mall. Like
it's an old ex like mini strip mall.
Yeah. And you walk in and
in the middle of a cornfield.
It's in the middle of a cornfield, and it's the most humble, simple. There's nothing in there that doesn't need to be there, And I love that about the Coming Home Network, that it's not all about like, oh, hey, where's Marcus Grodi, this big, guy or whatever. He's there. He's got a humble little simple place to do the work that God's called him to do. And if you feel led to support that, then I would say do it, because it's all part of that process.
Well, and again, the reason that building is so small and humble and assuming is because the most of the work of our apostolate doesn't happen inside that building.
Amen.
Right? It happens out with the people that we're like connecting and working with. And it's a blast to be a part of. It is cool. It's Easter all day, every day where we are, man.
Well, I want to thank you again personally for inviting me on that and being welcoming to me and for the work that you guys have done, and to, Jim Anderson, a guy who I corresponded with a lot when I was coming into the church, and he spent plenty of time with me on the phone, talking to me about answering questions and things like that. I mean, it's just been an incredible thing. So, and thank you, Matt, for taking time out of your busy songwriting schedule for our new project, The Converts, to join us here on Catholic Feedback. I know my listeners and viewers have appreciated this time. And again, if you ever want to listen to more of what Matt's doing, just get up early and turn on EWTN.
Real early.
To it probably 3 or 4 times a week. And I always enjoy it. But thank you so much, Matt, for taking time out of your schedule to join us on Catholic Feedback.
Hey, really appreciate the invitation. Anytime I spend with you, it flies.
Awesome. Likewise, my brother. Well, listen, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in and watching this episode of Catholic Feedback, where we exist to connect the eternal truths of the Catholic faith to everyday life. And I can't think of a more Catholic feedbacky thing to do than what we just did, talking about how we connect all the eternal truths of who the Catholic Church is and what it is, and connect that to the lives of people who are ready to say, yeah, I want to be a part of it, but I don't know where to go. I don't know what I'm doing. This is what we're all about. So thank you, guys. If you have a question that you'd like for me to tackle on the episode, please send your questions and comments to feedback@catholicfeedback.com. And I want to thank you guys for your prayers and for your support. And I look forward to seeing you next week right here on Catholic Feedback. God bless and take care. Thanks for listening to Catholic Feedback with Keith Nestor. Send in your questions and comments to feedback@catholicfeedback.com. This podcast is brought to you by Stewardship, a mission of faith, and is also supported by our team at patreon.com/Keith Nestor. Please consider joining our support team. Catholic Feedback is a production of Down to Earth Ministries. For more information about Down to Earth, or to bring me to your parish or event, visit down2earthministry.org. See you next time.